Hello, my name's Jeff Stevens and I'm developing CultGame, a text RPG where you get to start your own cult in a procedurally generated fantasy world. Procedural world generation is a well-known feature of popular modern games like Minecraft, where players can have completely unique worlds they get to call their own. Although the world terrain itself is usually generated with this technique, it's much less common that the histories and stories of these worlds are procedurally generated. History generation has been done in games before, like Dwarf Fortress, a big inspiration of mine. But you might be wondering, how does it actually work? Well, you clicked on the right video. Today, I'm going to talk about how I did research and then created procedurally generated history in my game. Let's get started. So, where do we start with procedurally generating history? Well, like most things in life, I believe we can start with deciding what we want our end result to be first, and then we can begin to chart a course for us to reach that destination. In the game that inspired me, Dwarf Fortress, procedurally generated history looks a lot like this. It's definitely a serviceable way to create a story for a world, but it's a bit bland. It's a simple catalog of events. With the way that Dwarf Fortress creates their history, though, it's totally understandable. The textual history that we see is just a result of the entities in the game interacting with one another. It's an actual history of events that have occurred in the game as a result of the computer simulating the interactions between the characters. The game is playing itself. This is an extremely powerful way of creating a true in-game history. Just let the computer play the game and log what happens. Simple, right? However, I felt that this did not quite meet my own needs. I wanted to also generate a textual history, but I wanted my game's histories to be short, engaging, and fun to read. Fiction, right? I'm going for something that like a humorous fantasy novel instead of a long laundry list of boring events that you might find in the Book of Genesis. Additionally, the core gameplay loop of my game hasn't even been finished yet, nor has my AI been finished yet. It took the creators of Dwarf Fortress many years to create their game. Realistically, there is no way that I'm going to be able to use their method of simulating gameplay to procedurally generate world history if my game isn't even playable yet. To write a short, interesting textual story that has bearing on the game world, I then turned my attention to simpler generation methods. Computer games, they tend to be more complex because of all the math is being done by a computer. We don't put that on a human, right? So I thought of looking at inherently simpler mediums, board games. One of my favorite board games is Betrayal at House on a Hill, a horror-themed game where players explore a procedurally generated haunted house. Procedurally generated might be a little bit generous. It's mainly randomly generated. I'll explain. The generation of the haunted house is simple. Once a player walks through a door to enter a new room in the house, a card is drawn off the top of a room tile deck for the specific floor of the house the player is on. So the next room they enter is randomly generated with a single condition. The simplicity of this is really appealing. I could just pick a series of random events if I was making my own world history, just like I would be drawing tiles from the room deck in Betrayal. But yet again, this is more random generation than procedural generation. The problem left to solve was, how do we use an attractively simple approach to generate a history that is still believable and doesn't look like a random mishmash of text? I did some more research to find some games that had methods that tried to solve this problem, and I found a game which was successful and interested me called Caves of Qud. Caves of Qud is an RPG that creates short, digestible, and fun-to-read procedurally generated histories by choosing random historical events and filling in their blanks with a Mad Lib-style approach. For those who aren't familiar, Mad Libs is a word game where you have a story with a bunch of blank spaces that are requested to be filled based on their part of speech. So you go around the room asking for answers to fill in these blanks, and then once all of them are filled in, you read the inevitably wacky story, right? The developers of Caves of Qud even gave a great GDC talk about how their procedural history generation system works, and they even wrote a paper on it too. I'm going to link both of these in the description for y'all. The short of it, though, is that they connected a series of events that contained predefined text, and also text within that predefined text that should be replaced based off of the properties of the characters and other entities in the game. they randomly selected events to occur, much like drawing room tiles to generate the haunted house in Betrayal. These events were compelling prose, and they had narrative coherence by filling in the blanks with characters, places, items, and factions that exist in-game. They did all of this without actually simulating gameplay like Dwarf Fortress. This was very attractive to me. We were getting somewhere, right? So I decided to base my procedural generation method off of theirs. But I would add my own twist of things, of course, yes. So, here was my plan. The history of Cult Game Worlds would consist of a series of episodes, which are essentially pre-written bits of text with blanks to fill in that are relevant to the things that exist in the world. These episodes come in 5 different types: historical detail, legend, natural disaster, turmoil, and peace. To generate a history, we make a random weighted choice using the Roulette Wheel Selection Algorithm to choose an episode to add to our series of episodes that make up our history. So this is much like randomly drawing cards from the room tile deck in the Betrayal board game. But this way we can influence what type of events will happen next by weighting the random choices based off of their types and other properties. You can think of this like choosing an episode is spinning a wheel on the Wheel of Fortune, where different episodes are different colored regions of the wheel. This way, if we have a world that has been beaten down by many wars, catastrophes, and turmoil episodes, we might slightly increase the chance, weight, or size on the wheel of the turmoil episodes for them to be selected, so that if we randomly spin the wheel, there's a higher chance that we're going to get another turmoil episode. And in the same way, we might also increase the chance of selecting an episode that brings a hero into the world to save it from evil, an individual episode, maybe a legend episode. And that could drastically increase the odds for future episodes to be peace type if the hero saves the world, right? So the influence of future episodes is not just only governed by episode type. Individual episodes can influence the future episodes chosen. Like, for example, if we have a war episode that occurs in our history, we directly increase the odds of another episode which is the ending of a war to occur, or the odds of a mutiny or some other war-related event. You can see how granular we can get with the control of future episodes. So with this method, with this way, we get to create an overarching historical narrative that makes sense. It maintains a trajectory, and hopefully create a more compelling history than a history where all of the events are selected purely randomly. Once we select an episode, we fill in its blanks. For example, take a look at this text for an episode called New National Faction. For these blanks, we'll generate a new national faction, require that it have a random trait, and that trait inform the generation of a method for how the faction came to power. So, for example, the faction might have a culture of scholarship, so we randomly assign the faction the Fine Scholars trait. And that'll increase the intelligence of the characters and the populations from our faction, and it also might increase the odds of generating an emergence method of this faction that says they came to power through a highly niche book club of nerds who were fully convinced by their own conspiracy theories that they made after reading terrible sci-fi novels. Something fun like that, yeah. So once we fill in all the blanks for an episode of history by generating things to exist in the game world, one by one, episode by episode as we generate our history, we go on to the next episode, and then once we're done with all the episodes, that's it. Once we have a complete series of episodes that have been selected and have had their blanks filled in, which in our case, like a sample size history, we're going to say is 6 episodes, we perform an analysis on our generated history to see what types of things we generated. What episode types is our history composed of, and then we'll perform a weighted random selection to choose an introductory episode and a conclusion episode that bookends our history with an appropriate beginning and end to match the theme, to give the writing a feeling of completion, because just listing an event to begin and listing an event to end, sometimes that's not necessarily appealing to readers. The writing requires introduction and resolution, right? So we want that as well. And also, if we have events that occur and events or blocks of things that happen make up our history, we want to make sure that there's a feeling of progression from one to the next, right? So we get to generate transitional phrases between the episodes, and these transitional phrases are chosen also by a weighted random selection, where we generally choose from a pool of generic transitional phrases with equal weights, but certain episodes have the option to contain transitional phrases that are either required to introduce them, like this one here, which is required after an introductory episode, or rather just have a chance of being selected during the random weighted selection, much like this one here for introducing the completion of a great building. Once this is all complete, we have a series of episodes. We have the transitions between them, and then we have the introductory and the concluding episode. We can theoretically print our textual history by concatenating all of the text from the episode and the transitional phrases together. So here we come to the moment of truth. Now, before I show you a history generated by CultGame, please know that I've only programmed 5 historical detail episodes fully into the game, and quite a bit of gaps in the logic in the algorithm are filled with random choices. Suffice to say, it does need work, but I'm still happy with the product that exists right now and how it's working in its early stages, so very good. Let's see some of CultGame's procedurally generated histories. Okay, so let's go and procedurally generate a history. To do that, we're going to go into the world creation. We're going to leave pretty much everything default here. We're going to leave the history length medium, which means we're going to do 6 episodes, but let's generate a world. And then we're going to be seeing, after everything gets populated here, after the terrain gets popped up, the history gets generated. We can go into view world history of the Mystic Firmament and see what we have. The history of the Mystic Firmament has been forgotten between several dark ages. The mysteries of the past lay hidden miles under graves and oceans where even the brave have not ventured. Humans have survived, struggling through the lawless apocalypse. Through the glorious burden of generations of great men, the torch has been rekindled. Thus dawns this new age of light. So that's our intro episode. And then our first episode has the introduction. The beginning of this age of light is marked by, and then the rule of Whitney over the chair monarchy. So we generated a character named Whitney, and ruling over a faction called the Chair Monarchy. Whitney's legacy was the famous introduction of national parks. So that was a faction perk that we generated for the Chair Monarchy. The response to this was overwhelmingly positive. Who knew going outside was healthy for you? Succeeding Whitney was Cornelia Aquilinus. So there we go. That's an episode. So then we have the next thing history recorded was the day the Black Kingdom signed into law required military service. After several generations, everyone's grandma had been trained for war. A frequently remembered event of this was the day that the evil state signed into law national parks. Very evil of them. The response to this was overwhelmingly positive. Who knew going outside was healthy for you? Next, there was the completion of the Bad Silver Monarchy's giant treehouse. It towers over the Stag snowfields as a symbol of the people's respect for nature. Next, there was the beginning of the Blue Shadow Church, a religion united around their desire to become filthy rich. Spiritual history was made with the beginning of the Ironwood sect, a religion which united around their desire to achieve world domination. And then we have the conclusion episode, and so the Wheel of Fate has turned once again. The Mystic Firmament awaits legends who earn the right to ascend the mountain and etch their name into these very stones of time. So that's awesome. So we chose the Age of Light intro episode up here, this first block of text, and then we see each block of text as an episode. The next one here, the beginning of this Age of Light is marked by the end of this one right here, is the new national faction one we were talking about earlier. The next thing history recorded was the day... Okay, so this is a new famous law gets passed. This is another famous law gets passed, so same episode here, actually. The completion of a great building. So all these are historical detail episodes, as I mentioned. Then a beginning of religious faction. beginning of another religious faction. So yeah, this is just a lot of historical details, but you can see that we're generating a lot of interesting things, and it's pretty cool. So that's our first one. We're going to generate a couple more for you guys. And I won't necessarily read them or go super in depth. I'll do brief explanations of them. You can pause the video if you'd like to read them all yourself, but I'll do a few more. Okay. Terrain gets generated on this one. The Crystal Earth. View history. So the only intro episode we have right now is the Age of Light. So the end of rule of Ramona Furno. So this is the end of a great leader's rule. Excuse me. Oh, this right here is new national faction, new religious faction. New religious faction, religious leader, end of their rule, a new religious faction. So yeah, you can see with the amount of episodes we have, it's kind of limited, but we are generating, you can see the different blanks being filled in if you see the same episode before. So I'll give you a second if you want to pause and read this, but I will go and do another one. Let's do a few more for you guys because you waited a long time for this. I love this little desert just sitting out here in the middle of nowhere on the Diamond Moon. Okay. All right. Here we go. I will pick another one now that you got a second to pause and do that. Let's do a few more. The war-torn plain. Okay. Do two more. I love this new idea that we have for the terrain generation. Terrifying world now. The history of the terrifying world. All right, and we'll do one more for you guys. I will see if I can analyze the last one a little bit more. We'll see what happens. Okay. Starry Expanse. So the Starry Expanse, we have the Age of Light. It kind of works for the Starry Expanse name. The Water Magocracy, I like that. So right here, known for their people's barbaric nature. Right now, the name of the faction is purely random, but it would be interesting if once we determine things like traits and stuff like that, we base the naming of the faction off of their traits, because water mages don't really read as barbaric to me, but that's just part of the process that's being filled with random information right now. The Highland of Tide sounds perfect for the Water Magocracy. So we need to take properties like dominions or resonant phenomena like water and make that part of the naming or what they want to, the type of places where they want to exist, because that'd be pretty cool. And these, this is the emergence method. Right now that's random as well, but it would be interesting if we could eventually base that on something concrete and resonant with everything else that the faction has going for them. Sort of like how in Caves of Qud the sultans have a like an element or a domain or resonant phenomena that they are work with, like ice, or I think we saw in the little clip earlier the guy who slept with everyone, the many-spoused. All right, let's see this one. Benevolent Gold Magocracy. A lot of Magocracies. See, this also doesn't resonate with mages, required military service, but it still works. We still get all the blanks filled in. The Bad Ministry. Yeah, that is kind of a bad ministry if you want to be launched into the sun. Ghast Kingdom Skull Castle, that works. Alright. Iro, Werben, Jaegerman, Jensen. Yep, we do take names that are inspired by animation that I grew up with. I'll have to maybe clean that up for the first release, but sometimes, yeah, funny names show up. A lot of required military service, and that's probably because of the type of the laws that can be signed into the type of laws that can exist in the game. There's only several, so you will frequently see the same ones generated over and over again. All right, and then this is a bit of an error with how I have the text printing. It's not printing everything, but we'll fix that eventually. All right, I think that's good. We've generated a few histories for you guys to take a look at. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me today. I hope you got something out of this video, whether that's learning, just some entertainment, or an invested interest in the work that I do. Still, thank you very much. I am very privileged now to say that I have received some support from you guys on Ko-Fi. Thank you for believing in my work. So a lot of people in my generation, we like Avatar: The Last Airbender, and a character from that show, Uncle Iroh. I'll quote him right now. He says, "While it is always best to believe in oneself, a little help from others can be a great blessing." So thank you for being that great blessing for me. In this video and future videos, I'm going to be shouting out supporters in the credits. If you would like to send me a tip on Ko-Fi to support my work, I would very much appreciate it. But please don't feel obligated to, only if you want to. You'll find a link in the description where you can do that. Our two supporters so far for Bucephalus Studios and CultGame are C-Standard.io and Adele4. Thanks again to both of you. Really appreciate it. I hope to see you again soon. Thank you again for sharing time with me. The next order of business is going to be programming basic gameplay. That's going to be a pretty cool video. And finally, after so long, you're just seeing all world generation. You're seeing all these aesthetic, these arts. Get to see a little bit of gameplay. So that'll be cool. Or at least some UI for framing out gameplay. So looking forward to it. See you then. Take care.